He held up a crisp stack of $10,000 while his wealthy friends filmed everything on their phones. "Come on, lady. 10 grand says a suburban mom can't last 30 seconds against a third-degree black belt." The neighborhood block party erupted in laughter. Everyone saw a quiet 34-year-old woman standing in her own driveway. They had no idea who I really was. I looked at the money, then slowly unzipped my oversized jacket and let it fall to the pavement. Underneath, I wore an olive-drab army shirt. The laughter stopped. Julian's confident smile disappeared when he noticed the black and gold Ranger tab on my sleeve and the insignia showing my rank. I was Major Victoria Reed, and he was about to discover that military training was very different from martial arts competition. I had spent more than a decade in the U.S. Army, serving through demanding training, leadership assignments, and overseas deployments. After my latest assignment, I was temporarily stationed near my hometown of Sacramento. All I wanted was a quiet life. Unfortunately, my next-door neighbor was Richard Vance, a wealthy tech executive who acted like he owned the entire neighborhood. His 22-year-old son Julian was even worse. Julian was tall, athletic, and a state champion Taekwondo black belt. He drove a loud sports car, blasted music whenever he wanted, and treated the neighbors like they were beneath him. Because I usually wore loose hoodies and kept to myself, Julian assumed I was harmless. I never corrected him. Years in the military had taught me something important. You don't need to be the loudest person in the room to command respect. For weeks, Julian's behavior got worse. He regularly parked across my driveway and laughed whenever I asked him to move. "Relax, lady," he would say. "Some of us actually have important places to be." I stayed calm. But Julian mistook my patience for weakness. Everything changed at the neighborhood summer block party. Julian arrived with his friends, blasting music and showing off his Taekwondo skills in the street. When 80-year-old Mr. Henderson politely asked them to lower the volume, Julian stepped toward him and began mocking him. Then he pushed the elderly man backward. That was enough. I stepped forward and placed myself between them. "That's enough," I said calmly. "Back up and keep your hands to yourself." Julian stared at me before laughing. His friends immediately pulled out their phones. "Look at this," Julian said, grinning at the cameras. "The neighborhood lady thinks she's a hero." Then he pulled out a thick stack of cash. $10,000, he announced. "I bet you can't last 30 seconds against me." The crowd went silent. His friends started cheering and recording. Julian thought I was about to be embarrassed. He had no idea he had just challenged the wrong woman. They saw a 34-year-old woman in a baggy gray jacket standing against a state champion. To them, I looked completely outmatched. Julian waved the $10,000 in the air, smiling like the victory was already his. He had no idea he was walking straight into his own trap. I looked at the money, then at Julian. The entire street went silent. Without saying a word, I removed my gray jacket and let it fall to the ground. Underneath was my olive-drab army shirt. On my sleeve was a black and gold Ranger tab, along with my major's rank insignia. Julian's smile disappeared. His father, Richard, stepped onto the porch and froze. The neighbors stared at my uniform, finally realizing I wasn't an ordinary suburban woman. I was a U.S. Army officer with years of military experience. "Your challenge," I said calmly. "I accept." Julian hesitated, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. He raised his hands and rushed toward me with a fast Taekwondo kick. I stepped aside, closed the distance, and used a controlled takedown. Within seconds, Julian was on the ground and unable to continue. The crowd went completely silent. His friends lowered their phones, stunned by how quickly the fight had ended. I released him and stood up. Julian scrambled backward, humiliated. His $10,000 had fallen across the pavement. I calmly picked up every bill. Julian probably thought I would keep the money. Instead, I called Mr. Henderson over. I handed him the entire $10,000. "This money will go to the local Veterans Support Center," I announced. Julian was kind enough to sponsor it. Julian could only nod, too embarrassed to argue. Then Richard walked toward us. His face was filled with shame. "Major Reed, I'm deeply sorry for my son's behavior," he said. "There is no excuse for what he did." Then Richard turned to Julian. His son would lose access to his luxury car, his allowance would be cut, and he would spend the summer completing community service at the same Veterans Center receiving the $10,000. For once, Julian didn't argue. He simply lowered his head and accepted the consequences. The neighbors applauded. The confrontation had ended without unnecessary violence, and the entire neighborhood had witnessed a powerful lesson about respect and accountability. As the sun began to set, the block party returned to normal. Kids rode their bikes. Neighbors talked and laughed. Later, I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee and watched Julian help Mr. Henderson carry tables into his garage. That was the real victory. Strength isn't about showing everyone what you can do. It's about having the discipline to stay calm and using your strength to protect people who need help. Julian learned that lesson that afternoon. And our neighborhood finally found its peace. So, what would you have done if someone like Julian challenged you in front of the entire neighborhood? Would you have walked away or stood up for someone who needed help? Share your thoughts in the comments and let me know where you're watching from. If you enjoyed the story, like the video, subscribe and turn on notifications for more stories. Thanks for watching. Stay strong and I'll see you in the next one.